and I wrote out my last will, a note to my wife and to the kids, and I hung it inside that cabin on the wall so that when somebody found my bones sometime, they'd know who I was and who to get a message to. I can't remember what convinced me that I wouldn't go on much longer. I climbed into my sleeping bag. I was shaking so bad that I couldn't fall asleep. I must have at some point. And this figure came through the wall. It looked like some kind of a large dog's head, just an image with a foaming mouth. And it knew my name, and it talked to me directly. And it said, "Are you cold enough yet, Mike? Are you hungry enough yet, Mike? I can get you out of here." And I said, I rejected it. I said, "I'll never turn my will over to you." And the figure went away, and it got semi-light in the cabin. I felt warm, I felt full, and I slept till 10 o'clock the next morning, slept like a baby. And the next 2 days, I was just kind of okay with everything. Whatever happened was gonna happen. I remember on the Wednesday of the next week, Margaret, what a beautiful spot it was there. If I'd just come to visit, it would be even prettier, but being stranded there, it didn't seem that pretty. And there was a roar of an airplane. I remember running back up the trail just to watch an airplane disappearing across the bay, and I fired a flare and saw the plane turn towards me and keep coming, and pretty soon I saw the flaps coming down. So I knew he was going to land. I knew he'd seen the flare. And I came crashing down through the brush line, and there was one guy with a rifle. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I kept hanging onto the tail of his airplane, and I remember he took the keys out of the ignition and he put them in my pocket. He said, "Sit down, I won't leave without you." And he asked me, "Where's your airplane?" And I told him, "It's in the bottom of the lake." He looked at me and said, "You're the guy that's been missing for over a week?" And I said, "That's me." And I hopped in the airplane and away we went.
The call of the wild is hard to resist, and in summer there are plenty of resources to be found if you know where to look. Here's a useful survival tip. All sedges are edible. So how do you tell a sedge like this one? Well, most of them, if you cut them through, are triangular in cross-section, like that. Now, you can't eat the green parts because they contain too much cellulose. It's the seeds that you go for, and these can be ground up and made into a rough flour and cooked on a hot rock. Even some of the most unlikely of resources were used, like these sort of hair lichens. This one could be used as an absorbent dressing for bleeding wounds, could be used like kitchen towel to wipe the slime off the outside of fish before cooking, and it can even be used for lighting fires. This really is one of the very best tinders. Now I'm going to make something simple but quite special, a fish hook. What I've collected are all bits of spruce. I've got here a couple of thin bits of dead spruce branch and some spruce roots. What I have to do first of all is tidy these spruce roots up so that I can use them as a binding material, and for that I'm just going to prepare this thin stick by cutting the end so that it looks like a screwdriver. Now very carefully splitting it a few centimetres, like so, like that. Now I call this tool a brake. I'm going to use this to remove the bark from these roots. Next job is to split this root in half, and I start that with the knife very carefully. I don't want to cut myself. And I now peel the two halves away from each other. Now it's quite difficult to keep the split running centrally down the root, there's a tendency for the split to want to run off to one side. Now if that happens, the thicker remaining side has to be bent back more severely to bring it true again. And this is the same technique that's employed for splitting any sort of wood. Now this piece of wood is going to make the shaft. So that's it, ready for the next stage, which is to fit a barb onto this hook. I'm going to use a bone from a halibut. I'll trim this up a little bit, and I'm going to lash that into that position using the spruce root. I start by taking the end and placing it parallel to the barb. And now I wrap around the shaft and the hook at the tail end and continue going in that fashion. There. Needs a few more minutes just to tidy it up, but that is it. A simple fish hook. In summer the rivers here are full of salmon returning to spawn. They're all here, sockeye, silver, king, and I'll show you my favourite way to cook them. To cook my salmon I'm going to barbecue it or panace it. For that I'm going to use a couple of sticks. I've got a piece of alder here and an alder root I'm going to use as some string. I need to split the alder to hold the salmon fillet over the fire. And I'll also be using these sticks later. I just need to quickly gut the fish, rinse it in the sea, and we're ready to start. So now to fillet the fish, first thing I want to do is to remove these fins here. If I pull that down and get hold of it like a toggle so that I don't cut myself, and slice around with the sawing action. Normally leave a bit of meat on here because all of these bits can be saved and used later to make a good soup. This dorsal fin here, that comes off too, with a sawing action. Now turning my knife over, I come around behind the gills and that fin there, behind the head, and turn over and come back at that from the other side, like so. Now, what I've got to do is to take my thumb down to the spine and pinch the ribs and start to ease the ribs out from the flesh. And they come out beautifully like that. There you go, just like Felix the cat has been here. There's the head, the tail, all the ribs and the spine, and that can be saved to make a beautiful stock later on. Don't waste any part of the fish. Now just look through here for any little bones that may be left. There we go, beautiful steak, all ready for cooking, and that's where the sticks are going to come in useful. I'm going to use the sticks to hold the fish open in the cooking, and to start with I need to make 6 holes, 3 on each side where the sticks will go. What I like to do is to actually put the sticks through to start with. It helps me get the right mark when I turn the fish over, the right point to place the next hole. Turn him over, and now I can see quite clearly where I need to make the next holes. Salmon skin's extremely tough material. You can't just push the wood through easily, you need to cut the holes. In fact, wherever there are large salmon runs and indigenous